Hello, viewers and subscribers. Welcome to Blackford's Art of Learning. In today's sixth grade lesson, we will be focusing on part two of our lesson on comparing and contrasting genres. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that we can be engaged in today's lesson. So welcome once again to middle school. And here is our learning pathway. The quote for today is, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts," by Winston Churchill. All right, let's move on. All right, so we're going to continue with our standard, which is RL 6.9, compare and contrast text in different forms of genres in terms of their approaches to similar themes and topics. So we went over this in our previous lesson. Let us go ahead and look at our anchor chart. And remember, we're comparing and contrasting. Remember, compare speaks of how are they alike or the same. And clue words we may look out for: also, alike, to, and similar, same, like, both. When we speak of contrast, we look at how are they different, and we look for clue words such as allow, however, unlike, but, not, only, or difference. Then we can utilize the Venn diagram. And let us review some genres. These are types of literature. We have realistic fiction, which is a story that is not real, but the story could happen, like the story that's called A Summer to Remember. Science fiction, Journey to Planet Zebnor. It's a fantasy story with science, which often takes place in the future. Historical fiction, a made-up story that takes place in the past. A mystery is a story where the characters are trying to solve a puzzle. A fantasy is a story that has events that could never happen in real life. Poetry, verses that often rhyme and evoke feeling. Informational text, a nonfiction book that gives facts about real things. Biography, a story about someone's life written by someone else, like Martin Luther King Jr. Autobiography, a story about someone's life written by that person. For example, my life in the White House. All right, so let's move on, and we're going to watch the instructional video.
And the games begin. Jack and the Beanstalk versus Little Red Riding Hood. Both two different stories from the fairy tale genre. How do we know they're in the same genre? Well, both stories follow similar patterns of events. They start with words like once upon a time, and the main character outsmarts the villain in the end to live happily ever after. Sounds like a fairy tale to me. So stay tuned as Jack and the Beanstalk takes on Little Red Riding Hood as we compare the theme and topic of these two texts within the same genre. Before the games begin, let's recap these two stories. Many years ago, Jack's father was wronged by an evil giant. Now, Jack's family is so poor that they must sell their cow for money. Instead, Jack trades his cow for magic beans. He plants them and they grow into a beanstalk. He climbs the beanstalk and up to the giant castle he goes. He sees that the wealthy giant has food to spare, so Jack takes food and gold from the giant, climbs down the beanstalk, chops the beanstalk down, and the giant falls to his death. In the end, Jack and his family have a massive feast and much more money. And story number 2. Because her grandmother is sick, Little Red Riding Hood braves the dark and scary woods to deliver her a basket of food. The wolf in the woods is aware of Little Red's plan and travels to grandmother's house. He eats the grandmother, dresses himself in her clothes, and waits to eat Little Red. Once she arrives, he tricks her into thinking that he is the grandmother. Just as he tries to eat her, a woodcutter comes to her rescue in the nick of time and kills the wolf. Okay, so now that we've recapped these two stories within the same genre, let's compare their topics. So what is topic? Topic is what the book is mostly about. It's not the same as a theme, and it's not really summary. Oftentimes, it's just one word that sort of gives an overview of the story. When you compare the topic of two texts in the same genre, the first step, identify the topic of each text. Looking back at the key events in the story can help you identify the topic. We know that in Jack and the Beanstalk, the giant wronged Jack's father. Jack's family is now poor. Jack steals back riches from the giant, and then the giant falls to his death. So we can say that the topic of this story is revenge. Let's recap the events in Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood goes to deliver the basket to her grandmother. The wolf eats the grandmother. The wolf tricks Little Red Riding Hood and tries to eat her. And then the woodcutter kills the wolf. So we can say that the main topic here is more like self-defense. Because in the end, the wolf dies because they're trying to protect Little Red Riding Hood. Step 2, compare the topics from each text. So now let's compare these two topics of revenge and self-defense. Both of these topics involve protecting your own self, even though you're actually harming somebody else. Both of these topics also require a specific perspective. For example, in Jack and the Beanstalk, he's taking revenge on the giant, even though the giant may not know that he's taking revenge on him. But these two topics are also kind of different. Revenge is more about payback, justice, and getting even, and it's on purpose, whereas self-defense is more about protecting yourself and less about actually trying to get back at somebody else. So we can see that these two texts within the same genre have similar themes, but they're not the same. So now, let's move on to theme as we compare the theme of these two texts within the same genre. The first step in comparing themes is you have to identify the theme of each text individually. I know that you already know how to identify themes, so we won't go over this. But we know that from Jack and the Beanstalk, the theme is that even a lowly person like Jack can become a hero. And you also know that the theme of Little Red Riding Hood is to be cautious and careful of your surroundings. Now that we know the themes of each of these texts, we can start to compare them. I think to myself, gosh, these themes are so different. How can I compare them? Well, why don't we do this? We can start with what we do know. We can start by contrasting them. So for the theme of Jack and the Beanstalk, it seems like the theme is really a lot about heroism and bravery and justice. And Jack is really on the offensive, so that he can be a lowly person who becomes a hero. For Little Red Riding Hood, the theme is a little bit more of a warning. It's about caution, conscientiousness, and being on the defensive, being prepared for disaster. So now that I've identified these differences, it'll be a lot easier for me to find the similarities. If I think about it, I know that for somebody to become a hero, they have to take some risks. And same with being cautious and being careful of your surroundings. Sometimes that can be really risky. So both of these themes involve risk-taking. Okay, sports fans, we've compared and contrasted Jack and the Beanstalk and Little Red Riding Hood, both books in the same genre, in regard to their similar topics and themes. And there's no clear winner. So now you know how to compare and contrast the theme and topic of two texts within the same genre.
All right, boys and girls, I hope you have listened carefully. And now you're going to share out what you have learned from the video about comparing and contrasting genres. So you notice they utilize a Venn diagram to compare the stories in the video. All right, guys, we are going to be playing a Kahoot game to compare and contrast different genres. So once you click on the picture, you're going to type in the code that is being generated. Okay, let's enter the code. All right, so once everyone has joined, we'll start the game. Sorted.
I know it's hard, but we're all having to say goodbye to our friends.
All right, so once the game has finished, you will see who's on the podium. Alright, so let's move back to our lesson on comparing genres. Now we're going to learn more about it, and we're going to be reading a text. Actually, we're going to be reading two texts and comparing those two texts. But while we're reading, As usual, there are some key vocabulary that we need to know. So we're going to review these quickly. Retorted means to reply angrily or sharply. Canyon, a deep, narrow valley with steep sides. Rampaging, rush around in a violent and uncontrollable manner. Fluttered, to move back and forth rapidly. Imploring, to ask someone in a determined, sincere, and sometimes emotional way to do or not to do something, or to ask for something in this way. So if you have your iReady textbook, you can go to page 204 and we'll work up to 206. Or you can click on the link to utilize Classkick. And we're going to compare these two stories for Fizzle and Ogel's Tears. Okay. So let's get to, okay. So today I'm going to pull a name from my cup. I'm going to pull one of the fudge sticks from the cup to do a cold call. So let me go ahead and pull the name from the cup. Okay, so Eli will be reading today. And remember, we're going to look out for these key terms: retorted, to reply angrily or sharply, and also canyon, a deep, narrow valley with steep sides. So it says, read the text, use the study buddies and close reading to guide your reading. So it says, as I read, I'm going to think about the theme or main message of the story. Okay? Fort Fizzle by Robert Ingalls. Chief Joseph huddled with the other Nez Perce leaders in the shadow of the nearby mountains, listening quietly. We have to fight and defend our people, said White Feather. The white soldiers began this war, not us, and now they are the ones refusing to let us leave peacefully. They're frightened, said Lean Elk. So are the settlers in Bitterroot Valley. That is why the soldiers built that foolish fort in the canyon. But this is a battle we can win. All right? So what type of person is Chief Joseph? Says underline the phrase in the 6th paragraph that helps readers understand his character. All right? So when we get to the 6th paragraph, we're going to underline the phrase that helps us know what type of character Chief Joseph is. So before we get there, what type of character you think he is? If you say somebody who is brave and courageous and strong, someone who will defend the people, and he's a strong leader, you are correct. Let's go ahead and continue. So it says, but this is a battle we can win. A battle just means more deaths, Joseph retorted. So he said this angrily. A battle just means more death. Better to die fighting than to wait here like cowards, White Feather exclaimed angrily. He looked away. I'm not saying we should wait, explained Chief Joseph patiently, but my plan requires another form of courage. So what line in paragraph 6 helps us understand Chief Joseph's character? Yes, if you said, but my plan requires another form of courage, you are correct. That night, Chief Joseph instructed the tribe to pack up their belongings and leave as silently as possible. Then, instead of heading through the canyon, the entire tribe climbed the steep mountain and crossed over a ridge above the fort, following a path barely wide enough for a mountain goat. Several hours later, they reached the valley on the far side and continued peacefully on their journey. It says circle the phrases in the final paragraph that show how the author approaches the topic of courage. So we're going to circle phrases in the last paragraph, which has to do with courage, okay? So by showing wisdom and braving the mountains instead of the soldiers, Chief Joseph and his people avoided conflict and saved many lives. And the fort in the canyon became known as Fort Fizzle after the battle that never happened. All right, so what words or phrases help the author approach the topic of courage? Okay, so we can circle wisdom. We can also circle this phrase, braving the mountains. Saved many lives. Okay. All right. So let us now move on to the next story, Ogel's Tears, and then we'll get to compare both stories. And this is written by Anna Smith. And remember, we're looking out for these words: fluttered, to move back and forth rapidly; rampaging, rush around in a violent and uncontrollable manner; imploring, to ask someone in a determined, sincere, and sometimes emotional way to do or not to do something. Ogel's Tear. Kate, Eli, and Yuan sat together in Yuan's room, glued to the latest issue of their favorite comic book, Gilda the Great. Gilda was strong and fearless, fighting off enemies and performing amazing feats to protect her people from harm. In this issue, Gilda learned that an enormous gremlin-like creature named Ogel was rampaging through villages, tearing down trees and scaring families from their homes. So remember, rampaging means rushing around violently, just like what Ogel is doing. So it says this story is a fantasy. As I read, I'm going to think about how the author used fantastic events to deal with the topic of courage. So remember, fantasy has to, the genre of fantasy has to do with stories that can never happen in real life. Okay, like those superhero movies. So the trio eagerly turned the page to see how Gilda would defeat Ogel. Kate cleared her throat and read aloud. Just as Kate began reading, a flash of light lit up the room, and the pages of the comic book fluttered excitedly. Moments later, Kate, Eli, and Yuan found themselves standing beside Gilda in the midst of a mountain forest. Could this really happen in real life? And it says, compare the characters in this story with the characters in Fort Fizzle. Circle phrases in the 6th paragraph that show how Eli is like Chief Joseph and his tribe. So we're going to see if Eli is as brave and courageous as Chief Joseph and his tribe. I'm so glad you have arrived, Gilda yelled as she raised her sword. We must join forces to vanquish Ogel. But just as Yuan tried to process what Gilda had said, he noticed one large tear rolling down Ogel's cheek. Yuan said, Gilda, wait, look at Ogel. I think he's crying. Suddenly, Eli stepped forward and began speaking to Ogel so softly his friends could not hear. Eli's tone was soothing, and he slowly inched closer to Ogel. Baffled, everyone shouted, imploring Eli to stop, but he refused to turn back. All right, so what phrase shows how Eli is like Chief Joseph and his tribe? In paragraph 6. Okay, so we can use soothing and refuse to turn back because he was courageous and brave to confront Ogel to see what is going on after he saw Ogel crying. Remember, Ogel was rampaging throughout the town and everyone wanted to vanquish Ogel, right? So remember, Ogel is a creature, gremlin-like creature, was tearing down trees and scaring families. So Joseph was definitely brave to stand up or to face Ogel. So moments later, Ogel dropped to his knees and began sobbing uncontrollably. Eli explained that Ogel was lost and scared, and the creature was desperate to find his family. The group was stunned for a moment, but then they helped Ogel to his feet and assured him that they would help him. Okay, so think about this story's ending and the final event of Fort Fizzle. Underline the sentence that shows how Eli and his friends avoid conflict. How is this different from Chief Joseph's solution? So remember in the previous story, Chief Joseph avoided the battle and took the people safely away from the fort or the cannon. And look at Ogel. In Ogel, they helped in this story, they helped Ogel to his feet and assured him that they would help him. So this reduces any form of conflict that may have arisen. So we can underline the sentence that shows how they avoided the conflict because Eli saw that Ogel was sobbing or crying and went over to speak to Ogel. And that's when he fell to his feet and Eli explained that he was lost. So after all, Ogel wasn't that bad after all. So group, we can underline this section, right? Now let us go ahead and answer the questions. Let's use the hints on this page to help you answer the questions. Which statement best describes the theme of both stories? All right, we already spoke of the theme, if you can remember. So let us choose the most suitable response. All right, so choice A, sometimes it takes more courage not to fight. We notice in both stories, they ended up not fighting. They had to be brave and courageous and try to make the decision to let peace reign. So this could be a possible answer. Let us leave this one because Chief Joseph was brave. Chief Joseph braved the mountains instead of the soldiers. And Eli refuses to turn back when approaching Ogel. So this could be a possible answer. But let us look at B. Do you think choice B is correct? When you cannot win a fight, sneak away and hide. That we know that's definitely out, and that's incorrect. The characters do not hide, right? They did not hide in the story. So this could not be the correct response. So we'll cross B out. C, true bravery comes from understanding one's enemy. Is that correct? So in the story, both characters actually, they understand their enemies or the enemy, but their bravery comes from taking action, and they took the right action to be brave and not fight. So C is out. D, only cowards refuse to take on a necessary fight. Is this correct? This is definitely correct because none of the two characters in the two stories were cowards. They were very brave. And not because you decide not to fight, that doesn't mean that you're a coward. So A is our most suitable answer. Which trait best describe Chief Joseph and Eli? Obedient and shy. Is that correct? So that's incorrect. Neither of the characters were obedient or shy. None of them. B, loyal and honest. So choice B is incorrect because the none of these characters displayed any traits of loyalty or honesty. So we can cross that one out. C, what about C? So choice C, intelligent and funny. Both of these characters they showed us that they were intelligent, but neither of them displayed any sense of humor. We didn't get any form of jokes or any sense of humor from our reading. So obviously our most suitable answer is brave and kind, because we have been speaking about bravery throughout the reading of both texts. Okay. So the first text we read was a fantasy, right? I mean, the second text was a fantasy. All right, let's go ahead and complete the written response. It says, compare and contrast the ways the two stories approach the topic of courage. Explain how each author resolves the conflict. Include at least 3 details from the text to support your answer. So how does the two stories approach the topic of courage? So we can recall in both stories that both stories show a battle that the heroes cannot win. And both show that it takes bravery to avoid a fight. So they both try to avoid the fight. In Fort Fizzle, it showed that the character walked away from a conflict, which was a courageous solution. And in Ogelsteer, it shows another way to solve the problem by making peace with the enemy to avoid the conflict. All right? So I hope you thought through your answer, and you can go ahead and type in or write your response if you're using your iReady book. All right, boys and girls, thank you for all your hard work. And let us continue. We're going to be doing small groups. And you're going to work on Mama's painted grill. You're going to be comparing two stories. Mama's painted grill and more room, less noise. You're going to compare those two stories. Okay. And answer the questions that follow. Remember, while you're in your small group, I'll be working with a group at my table. Remember the rules of the small group. There should be no interruption. No one interrupts the teacher while she's working with a group. And you work as quiet as possible in your group to complete your assigned task. Remember, after you have completed your activity comparing those two stories, then you're going to do news ELA, and you're going to work on what is an ecosystem for social studies. And you'll be provided with this text right here. And then you'll answer all the questions that follows. Afterwards, you'll do read works, the title Billie Holiday. And as usual, you can have the audio recording played, or you can read the text for yourself, then answer the questions that follow. Okay. And remember, during your small group, if you're working with a partner, you can use the Rally Coach Cooperative Learning Strategy that we went through in our previous lesson. All right, and then for my small group, I'll be focusing and practicing more utilizing these two stories. We're going to do 3 reading and engage in a close reading of The Tale of Johnnytown Mouse. And we're going to compare it to the town mouse and country mouse. Okay. Once you're finished, you complete your reflection. Thank you everyone for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and turn on the post notification bell. Once again, everyone, please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and turn on the post notification bell. Please be sure to look out for other videos.